giving all this money for the oppression of these people, of the Palestinian people, is morally wrong.
We shouldn't be ignoring Syrians. We should be doing more than feeling sorry. We should be actually learning from them because they've done incredible things.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown in over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We start with a simple Israeli outrage against a Palestinian. It took place while we celebrated Valentine's Day. So a man in a wheelchair is thrown to the ground, and when people rush to his aid, the brave IDF starts firing stun grenades. To this Israeli army, Obama is proposing a whopping 33% increase in aid, according to Defense News. He wants to up Israel's welfare check from $3 billion a year to $4 billion a year. Now, I don't see how anyone in the U.S. could object. We don't have anywhere to use that money in this country. BDS, boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. That's the way to pressure Israel, as these two gentlemen agree. Roger Waters, famed rocker, formerly of Pink Floyd, and Gideon Levy, columnist for the Israeli paper Haaretz.
Occasionally people say to me that they believe BDS is not the way to go, and I always say, my answer is always the same. I say, what would you suggest as an alternative? To this day, nobody in opposition to BDS has said to me this.
By the end of the day, BDS is run by people of conscience, and those people deserve respect and deserve to be listened.
I'm talking about the policies of this and many past Israeli governments in terms of the oppression of the Palestinian people.
Try the Israelis, really, when they will feel that they are punished for the occupation, when they will feel that they pay something for the occupation, and then hopefully people will start to ask, what are we doing? What is being done on our behalf, for God's sake?
And the pressure that we can bring also on our governments, you Americans here, on the government of the United States of America, which has to eventually be persuaded that giving all this money for the oppression of these people, of the Palestinian people, is morally wrong, and that the United States of America should stop doing it. And that's not just the government, it's everybody. In my industry, it is just beginning, that first flickering flames of solidarity are beginning to spread through a small number of people. But when it goes off, it is going to move like wildfire. And I will be so proud of my colleagues when we all join together and support this movement.
Now, something very difficult to watch. No, it's not violent or bloody. It's just a man speaking in agony over what Russian bombs have done to his town in Syria. There are subtitles, but you can get the whole message by just listening to the tone of his voice.
والله العظيم هبطنا الطياره منها نقول الحمد لله رب العالمين الطياره ما طلعت عم يستهدفنا بالليل وبالنهار وين بدنا نروح يا اخي وين بدنا نروح لك لاقوا لنا حل بس يا اخي عند هالدول عند العالم وين نروح؟ لك يا اخي وين نروح؟ والله العظيم قسما بالله شهرين هو نازل فينا كبس، وقسما بالله لين ما عملنا لكن ها ما عم نروحوا، لك عم نطلع برا. اجى الطياره تخبوه، اجى هاول تخبوه، اجى صاروخ تخبوه، هالولاد ليش عم تساوي ليه؟ اقسم بذات الله جنة العالم جنة، لك جنة يا عالم جنة، لك لعونا حي كرمال النبي يا اخي، لك يا عم محمد يا عم محمد، لك والله عم نبات فين؟ اقسم بالله جنازات 40 50 شهيد، اقسم بالله يوم ولا يوم انت يوم بكره تدور علينا. وين يا اخي العالم وين؟ وين تشوفنا؟ اقسم بالله دمرنا خالص، لكن يوم بعد عنا بيوت. وين نروح؟ كلنا مجردين. رحنا لمرة اولى انهزم، ورحنا لهون اولى طفش. وين نروح؟ طيران بالليل وبالنهار. اقسم بذات الله ما بنشوف الليل لا نهار. يا عالم يا اسلام، والله نذبح، والله نقتل، اقسم بذات الله يا اخي. كل نهارين ثلاثة مجرى عنهم، كل نهارين ثلاثة مجرى والله العظيم. صلح الجو والله الصبح، اقسم بالله ابو حمزي انا استشهد فلان والله العظيم يا اخي. اقسم بذات الله انا قايد، والله ما في جيش مسلح، اقسم بالله ما في جيش مسلح يا اخي. والله لو في مسلح لا برافو عليك، برافو عليك. كلها مدنية، كلها اطفال، والله العظيم كلها ضيوف. الضياع اللي حوالينا اويناها والله، قسما بالله يا اخي.
اخي الكريم مين اللي عم يستهدفنا هون؟
لك يا اخي يا طيران روسي يا الاسد، اذا هو عم يقول لك هذا اللي في الطيران مين عم يقصف؟ اي طياره قصفتنا هي؟ اي طياره بتخترق اجوالنا يا اخي؟ هو عم يقول ما في طيران بيستهدف كل شيء يا اخي. في عالم هون عنده كذا شاري بيشتغلوا، وعمال لك يا اخي عند البقرات عم يحبوا، عم يعدوا بكير فكروا الارهابيين. والله العظيم يا اخي قاعدين بالساعه 5 ريحنا بالبقرات والله، شهيد الله يا اخي. فكروا الارهابيين بس لقاهم، اول غاره، الثاني غاره، الثالث غاره، العالم قامت يا اخي. صارت تنقذ العالم اقسم بالله يا اخي. مجزره والله العظيم مجزره يا اخي.
وين
حلم ان شاء الله يا اخي.
المجزره وين؟
لك والله مصاري ما معنا نطفش، لك ما معنا ناكل، والله العظيم لو معك مصاري فلا عدتوني، اقسم بجد الله يا اخي. لكن عمي صلى شهرين بالمالي، البنت الثانيه الجنه. وين بدي اروح؟ وين بدي اروح يا اخي؟ اللي وين بدي اروح يا اخي؟ وين بدي اروح؟ يا ولي حلف الله يا اخي، والله العظيم خالص يا الله خالص.
طبعا هذا
كلنا بفد واحد، اخوك ابوك، لك جارك ما اخوك، هي فادنا جيراننا هوني. وين نروح؟ هذا شوف،
حسبي الله ونعم.
هذا شوف صعد علينا من شهرين يا اخي، وصعد علينا ضرب، صعد علينا الصواريخ، الطيران، لك عملوا هوني حرب. 14 طياره يا الله فظيعه، 14 طياره فظيعه من كوبي، والله العظيم من كوبي. اقسم بالله بياكلوا خبز يابس، لك والله حتاتيف، والله من الجبال عم يشحذ. اقسم بالله يا اخي محاصرين من جميع الجهات، والله العظيم 4-5 طيارات بالليل، 4-5 طيارات بالنهار، قصف وين الارهابيين. لك يا اخي مين عم يقصفنا؟ ما ارهابي عم يقصفنا يا الله، لك ما عندي ارهابي يا الله.
حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. هذا ما يحدث في بلدة الغنطو.
وين بدي اروح؟
نقل معاناة هذه البلدة بعد المجزرة. هذا ما حدث في هذه البلدة المنكوبة المحاصرة. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل، حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. 12/2/2016 مجزرة جديدة في بلدة الغنطو. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل، حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
A few days ago, the Russians bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Syria. This war crime is so common that doctors in Syria don't follow standard procedure and let the Syrian government know the GPS coordinates of the hospital. They assumed the Russians would use those coordinates to bomb the hospitals. So they hid, but it didn't help them. 11 died. We've been playing segments of a talk by journalist and author Robin Yassin-Kassab at Amnesty International UK. He and Leila al-Shami had just published a new book on Syria called burning country. We're actually going to start by showing a couple of minutes that we broadcast last week. It's about the curious role of Saudi Arabia in all this. Viewers of this program know we despise the Saudi monarchy, but their role in Syria, it's complicated.
You know, you've touched on it in the book as well, that the Saudis and the Qataris, to an extent, have also been counter-revolutionary forces. How damaging do you think their involvement actually has been with the popular struggle?
I do think it has been damaging, and I'll say why. I don't know which to say first. Okay, first, it has been damaging. Of course, everybody's response has been damaging. The Free Army, the defectors from the military, the people who couldn't stand being ordered to shoot civilians every day, and local men who picked up weapons to defend themselves, who had no ideology other than we want to stop this regime killing us, and we want the Syrian people to choose what comes next. Those people should have been supported. They should have been supported properly in 2012, and it should have been done. Of course, the Free Army itself, you can blame them, you can blame the coalition, you can blame the fractiousness of the Syrians and everything else. But I think the fundamental point is that you had different sponsors very tepidly and not properly arming people a bit, but different sorts of people and different militias. And then you got all these militias in competition with each other. And then you got some making videos of, look, we're fiercer and more Muslim than the other militia, so you should give guns to us instead of... And so it should have been coordinated. The West didn't want to get involved for all kinds of reasons. It actually actively stopped the Gulf countries sending the weapons that the people really needed to defend themselves, because they said we're scared that Islamists might get hold of some of these weapons indirectly. Well, a few years later, look what's happening. The West is bombing both Syria and Iraq because there's such an enormous problem with jihadists that wouldn't have existed if they'd armed the Free Army in 2012. So the Saudis and the Qataris and the Turks, by arming their own clients, contributed to this. The Qataris armed Islamists, not jihadists, but Islamists. The Saudis actually didn't. It's been really overdone. Apart from Jaish al-Islam, they've been funding Free Army groups, the Southern Front, and so on, because at the moment, as we saw in Egypt, where they helped Sisi's coup, they're scared of Islamism. Accept their own version. But Jaish al-Islam, when we come to organisations like Jaish al-Islam and Ahrar al-Sham, these two, they're Syrian organisations. They're not like Jabhat al-Nusra or ISIS, international jihadist groups with an international global agenda. They're Syrian organisations, and both of them have said, whether they really think it or not, I don't know, but both of them have said that they are willing to work in some kind of democracy. They want an Islamic state, but they're not going to force it on the Syrian people. And both of them practically have shown themselves able to work with Free Army groups and local councils and people who think differently from them. They do have a Syrian support base. It's not enormous, but they do have it. In Douma, Jaish al-Islam, Zahran al-Ush, and the clerics associated with this organisation have a support base, unlike ISIS, which doesn't have a real support base. It's trying to build one now. It's trying to engineer one. So these people have to be involved in any final solution. They're both revolutionary and counter-revolutionary. Yeah. I'm in the difficult position of supporting Jaish al-Islam when it's fighting the regime, or trying to defend its area, rather, from the regime. I support them. And when Russia kills Zahran al-Ush in an airstrike, the leader of Jaish al-Islam, I think that's a terrible crime, and it's pushed peace a lot further away. At the same time, I recognise that they are counter-revolutionary in that they're probably disappearing our best and brightest revolutionary activists. They don't do it regularly, but they did it with those. And they're not very nice people. And Zahran al-Ush made some very sectarian remarks about cleansing Damascus of Shia influence, which might have meant a future government won't be influenced by Iran, but could have meant that we're going to kick Shia and Alawis out of the capital. That's certainly how most Shia and Alawis read it, and it didn't help the revolutionary.
No, it's something that didn't build a lot of confidence in people who may not have been pro-Assad or pro-regime, but wanted the stability of the government, let's say, and it's probably been one of the failings of opposition groups. I mean, you know, we talk about Jaish al-Islam a lot, at al-Shami as well, doing joint operations with al-Qaeda's affiliates in Syria. It doesn't bring confidence, and I guess one of the difficulties is, and, you know, this conversation has happened a lot about, you know, maybe there was a point in 2012 where if there was increased arming, there may have been a tipping point. I think you probably agree with that. I guess the difficulty is the analysts, the people doing the security assessments, the policymakers looking at risk were thinking, well, how are these people going to use these weapons? Yes, they might well fight the regime, but how are they going to use them later, post-regime? And
well, I would have never expected any Western country to be giving weapons to Jaish al-Islam or Ahrar al-Sham. I'm talking about the Free Army, groups which, in fact, they do give weapons to sometimes. When it's, like, for example, when the Russian invasion and bombing began, suddenly, in the first day, 24 Assad tanks were taken out by vetted, non-jihadist Free Army groups. Those were Saudi-supplied anti-tank missiles, but the Saudis had got permission to supply them from the Americans, because if they give without permission, then the Americans will stop selling them weapons. Yes.
Although, ironically, probably those vetted armed opposition groups, probably their biggest enemy, especially in the north, was Jabhat al-Nusra.
Well, I don't know. It's a complicated thing. You see, there we go. To make a point or to show the Russians that it wasn't going to be that easy, in the first couple of weeks after the Russian invasion, all these anti-tank missiles, so that what they needed was anti-aircraft missiles, what the civilians needed, but all these anti-tank missiles were there, great. And now, the last few weeks, we haven't seen any being used. The bombing is even heavier. The Iranian and Lebanese and Iraqi and Syrian troops are recapturing towns and villages, and there are because Obama's decided that, well, we want to keep the Russians happy for the meeting in wherever it is, it's irrelevant.
Before we bring the audience in, it always sounds like a simple question to ask in terms of where things go from here or what your hopes are. I suspect you're quite cynical about the Geneva process, but I suspect you'd also appreciate that the diplomacy has a role to play. Interestingly, though, in the end of your book, which I thought was the most positive part, actually, regardless of that last line, you talk about alternatives. Alternative ways of self-organization, of people working outside of state structures. Maybe unpack that a little bit, because I thought that was one of the more exciting parts of the book, actually, near the end.
What am I trying to say there? Well, that was a critique, really, of the left, the dominant left. Not all of it. There's been some great leftist approaches to the Syrian
You quote many of them as well.
revolution, and I quote some of them, and there's certainly Syrian leftists who've been thinking about it very clearly. But too much of the left has been talking from a position of incredible ignorance, I must say. I don't blame the people, necessarily. I blame the key journalists and commentators that many of us, me included, I used to admire some of these people, who have really done a disservice, I think, have done some very, very poor reporting. And it's really commentary dressed up as reporting, and it's commentary which is retreated into campism. In other words, a kind of Cold War thing where they see it, they can't see the Syrian people, they zoom out and they think they see a struggle between America and Iran, or between imperialism and anti-imperialism, or between Putin's anti-imperialism, that's what, and American imperialism, or something like this. And that's, leftists in the past, I don't think, in the 1930s in Spain and so on, the people were responding in with a lot more human solidarity. I heard a very depressing anecdote about Noam Chomsky, who met a group of Syrian leftists. I was told this by one of the people he met, He was in Beirut and he asked to meet a group of Syrian leftists. So a group was rattled up and they were sat down with Chomsky, and he basically said to them, look, your revolution's over and you better, it's probably best for the world if you accept that, because imperialism has taken over your revolution. And this is the great Noam Chomsky. He's an old man now, so maybe we shouldn't like Fisk and so on, so maybe it's a question of age or something. But it seems to me like a basic, before you get to left or right, it's just a basic human principle. When there's something going on in a country, you go and ask the people in the country about it. If you are a leftist, you analyse the relationship between oppressing and oppressed classes in that country, in that context. That's first, before you start worrying about the geopolitics and the chess game of states. People seem to think there's some good states and bad states. States are all bastards. They're apparatuses for keeping elites happy and comfortable and secure. That's what states are. And some of them are better than others. Some of them have more space for other people's rights as well. But that's what a state is. And you can't expect a state to behave like a human being, as if this is a human being that I love, this is one that I hate. No, states are... and states act in contradictory ways. So there's the Islamist Saudi Arabia, where women aren't allowed to drive, but it funds the counter-revolution in Egypt, which removes an Islamist party from power. So when we go at it, Saudi Arabia is the root of... It's much more complicated than that, and I think we should start our analysis from people, not from states. The Syrian people have built incredible alternatives in the most difficult of situations, the committees and the councils and the newspapers and the cultural explosion, in terrible situation, when they're being bombed, when foreign powers are fighting them, and when transnational jihadists are in there oppressing them as well. The whole world is against them, and they're doing this, and we're kind of lecturing them about how they should, understand that stability requires, the anti-imperial cause requires that you make your peace with the Iranian soldiers who are killing you. It's just absurd. There we go. Yeah. I think that we have I think that we shouldn't just be feeling sorry for Syrians. We shouldn't be ignoring Syrians. We should be doing more than feeling sorry. Yeah. We should be actually learning from them, because they've done incredible things.
I think one of the good things about the book as well, it's for those people who I guess would describe themselves as progressives, leftists, liberals, whatever, human rights activists. It's a great resource, not just for the first-hand quotes from a lot of the activists in here, but at the back as well, you've got a whole list of underground newspapers and other books and blogs, news sites, activism, which people can check out. And like I said, this stuff doesn't get into the mainstream media, and why should it? It's not going to. This is grassroots activism. But those people who are genuinely interested in progressive politics would actually engage in this and try and educate themselves a little bit about it.
But the reason why it should, because it's true, like, why should it? Nobody wants to know about activism. But in the previous decade, we, the West, or America and Britain, actually not the West, America and Britain invaded Iraq, supposedly in order to bring them democracy. With tanks. And of course that wasn't what it was really about, but that's what the excuse was. So that was a big discourse, the democratization of the Middle East and so on. And now there are people doing it themselves. They're not asking you to bring it in on tanks or whatever, out of necessity, and because they're having a revolution and really thinking about things and working, they're trying to make democratic structures themselves, and we don't even know it's happening. So we tried to... can't tell the whole story, but we tried to tell the whole story. So the first chapter is background from the beginning of time to Hafiz al-Assad. The second chapter, we still don't get to the revolution. The second chapter is Bashar's first 10 years in power and his illusory Damascus Spring, the hopes for reform and how they were dashed, and then what he did with the economy, and what happened to society in that period immediately before the revolution. And then the revolution, the grassroots structures, the militarization of the revolution, the Islamization, which we try and put in a context. And we do try, although I'll come back to that. And then we have a chapter on culture, which I think is important as well, how culture was transformed during the revolution. That's an essential part of the story, which is usually missed out, and it's one of the longest lasting aspects of it. And then at the end we have two chapters. There is a chapter on the geopolitics, the roles that different states played, and also the Syrian elites, the coalition, the National Council, etc., etc. And then there's a final chapter which is called The Start of Solidarity, which is about how the media has responded badly, I think, to it, and how we should perhaps be responding. And yeah, we use testimony, and I would say that if you don't buy a copy, if you end up just like coming across it in a library at some point and you have 5 minutes, I would advise you just to go through the quotes, find the block quotes. What we wanted to do was amplify Syrian voices, which of course are sometimes contradictory. We wanted to amplify Syrian voices. We deliberately decided to amplify revolutionary voices, but that's from a range of, I mean, we've interviewed people from kind of moderate democratic Islamists to anarchists, you know, but we wanted revolutionary voices because we think those voices aren't being heard properly. But we also tried to contextualize the point of view of people that we don't agree with. So we've tried to give some background to explain why jihadism, Salafism and so on might make sense to some people, even though it makes no sense to us. And also why some Alawis are still loyal to the regime. I know Alawis who hate the regime but are still loyal. I think they're wrong, but I understand why they think like that. And we've tried to explain this background, how sectarian fears and resentments have been exploited by the regime and others.
March 5th and 6th in Washington, D.C., a summit on Saudi Arabia. Main sponsor, Code Pink. We'll have video. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.